Have you ever wondered why some women leave behind a trail of shattered hearts, confusion and obsession? None of it ever truly about love. It's not bad luck or merely a mismatch. There's a darker instinct at work, an unseen psychological hunger that devours from within. You might think it's personal, that she changed, that you weren't enough, but what if I told you it was never about you? Beneath every alluring smile and intoxicating glance, there lies an unconscious engine, a devouring force of the feminine psyche that Jung called the shadow. Imagine an ember smoldering in the dark, a hunger for validation, admiration, and emotional consumption that no amount of affection can sate. Picture it like drinking salt water to quench thirst. The more attention you lavish, the thirstier she becomes. You give praise and presents, and for a fleeting moment, everything feels perfect. Then, as dawn breaks, the glow fades. You wake to silence, to distance, to a coldness that feels as ruthless as a winter wind. In this video, we'll step into the shadows of female desire, shining a Jungian light on the archetypes of the siren and the femme fatale. The dark mother figures who seduce only to discard. We'll expose the hidden hunger fueling this cycle, an instinct so automatic that most women never even know it's driving them. Once you glimpse this truth, you can't unsee it. The question is, are you ready to peer into the void and confront the brutal reality behind her body count never ends? Let me know when you're ready, and I'll dive into the core Jungian concepts in the next section. Have you ever felt bewildered by that gnawing emptiness you can't quite name, especially when the person you're with seems magnetic one moment and suddenly vanishes the next? Jung described a shadow within each of us, a repository of suppressed needs and impulses that we refuse to face. In the feminine psyche, that shadow often manifests as an insatiable hunger for validation and emotional consumption. You might call it the devouring feminine archetype. Think of the siren luring sailors to shipwreck the femme fatale, weaving enchantment only to cast her prey aside, or the dark mother in myths whose love nourishes only to consume. This isn't about inherent cruelty. It isn't about a woman consciously plotting to break hearts. Rather, it's an automatic self-protective mechanism of the unconscious. Picture a woman who was abandoned in childhood or forced to silence her needs. Those wounds retreat into her shadow. Now imagine the shadow as a black hole inside her psyche, an inner void that no compliment, no gesture, no gift can ever fill permanently. It's like trying to quench thirst with salt water. Each sip feels momentarily satisfying, but in truth, it intensifies the hunger. So what exactly is this shadow? In Jungian terms, it's everything we deny in ourselves, our vulnerabilities, our hidden demands, our wounds. When that shadow becomes the driver of desire, women may unconsciously seek attention, devotion, or admiration as fuel. Once they absorb it, the fuel tastes stale, and a new source is sought. The cycle repeats again and again because the void whispers, "Feed me." The moment someone tries to fill it for good, boredom sets in. Why does stability feel like a death sentence? Why does consistent love, which should be comforting, trigger restlessness instead? In academic studies of attachment and psychodynamic theory, similar patterns appear: anxious avoidant dynamics. Avoidant attachment styles or fear of dependency in adults who learned early on that expressing need leads to pain. Yet Jung's language of archetypes, Siren Dark Mother, gives this dynamic a mythic resonance. It reminds us that these forces are older than any individual life story. They're woven into our collective unconscious. You may have been on the receiving end of this cycle of discard and blamed yourself. If only I had been more exciting, more spontaneous, more attentive. But the shadow doesn't care about being fixed. It demands an internal reckoning. It was never about your efforts. It was about an instinct hidden beneath every seductive smile, humming like a hunger you couldn't see. When you're ready, I'll explain how this inner hunger actually operates, what fuels it, and how it drives the seduction-discard cycle. Have you ever noticed that hunger isn't always about food? Picture a woman sitting at a cafe, scrolling through her phone. Likes and comments pour in, and for a brief moment, her chest glows with relief as if someone handed her a glass of fresh water. But the moment she looks away, the emptiness returns more ravenous than before. This isn't a physical craving. It's a psychological void, an inner hunger that no amount of affirmation can truly quell. In Jungian terms, that void emerges when early wounds, rejection, abandonment, emotional neglect get relegated to the shadow. This shadow is not a forgotten closet. It's a psychological engine that runs beneath awareness. When life feels unsafe, or when expressing need meant punishment, those urges get shoved into darkness. Over time, the shadow takes on a life of its own, whispering, "You are not enough. You will never be enough." And it craves one thing: validation. But what is validation to the shadow? It's not simply praise or attention. It's proof that she exists, that she matters, that her soul is worthy. Imagine a thirsty sailor who finds a spring of salt water he drinks, mistaking its taste for relief, only to find himself more parched. Validation functions the same way, like a flicker in a cavern. Attention illuminates a little corner of the void, but the rest of the cavern remains pitch black, echoing with echoes of self-doubt. So she moves on, seeking a new flame. This hunger is not sexual in the narrow sense, though it often overlaps with physical desire. It's a hunger for significance, proof that someone truly sees her. Notice how in everyday life she may demand compliments. "Tell me how amazing I look," or post heavily filtered selfies late at night. Those likes and comments act as microbolts of adrenaline, a momentary rush that fills the void for seconds. But the psychological engine needs more fuel, and soon the high dissipates. Consider the difference between a physical hunger, like craving coffee in the morning, a largely predictable cycle, and this psychological hunger, which is unpredictable and insatiable. The physical hunger follows a biological rhythm: eat, digest, feel satiated, and repeat hours later. The psychological hunger, by contrast, operates beneath consciousness. It often begins with a trauma. Perhaps her childhood caregiver withheld affection unless she performed perfectly, or rejection came with a harsh ultimatum. When those formative experiences lodge in the unconscious, they become a cavernous well of longing. You might ask, if she isn't even aware of this hunger, why can't she stop chasing it? The answer lies in the unconscious. Jungian psychology teaches that anything repressed gains psychic energy. When she denies her vulnerability, refuses to admit she was hurt, those suppressed needs intensify. They push her toward any external source that promises relief: the new admirer who showers her with compliments, the relationship that feels thrilling, the attention from social media. Each offering momentary respite, but none offer true completion. One real-life example: a woman named Maya, not her real name, grew up with a father who praised her only when she excelled academically. Whenever she earned top marks, his smile was radiant. Whenever she stumbled, his disappointment burned. Maya internalized that love is conditional. As an adult, she finds herself in relationships where she demands constant praise. "You never tell me how beautiful I am," and lashes out when attention wanes. But no matter how devoted her partner is, the momentary glow of validation fades. She feels hollow again and unconsciously pushes him away, concluding he must not truly care. In truth, the hunger was never about her partner's love. It was the shadow's echo. To grasp how the inner hunger operates, envision an engine fueled by external validation. At first, when she meets someone new, her shadow flickers with excitement, compliments, texts, affection. They all feed the engine, and for a time she feels invincible. She radiates confidence, drawing him in like moth to flame. But the engine soon demands more fuel. The same gestures that once felt intoxicating now seem stale. The compliments become just words, the texts become too much, the gifts feel predictable. This is not conscious cruelty, it's the engine telling her, "I need more." When the engine starves, the void's whisper grows louder. Find a new source. Find someone fresher. So she finds someone else, someone new to fill the gap. And he becomes the next temporary spring. The process repeats again and again because the shadow is an inner program that refuses to let go until it's confronted. The cruel irony is this: when she finally pauses, when the attention stops, when she's forced to face the silence, the void becomes deafening. Only then might she glimpse the cavern within, realizing that no external force, not love, not admiration, not sex, can fill the emptiness. Until that moment of reckoning, the shadow's hunger will drive the seduction-discard cycle, leaving each partner to pick up the pieces. We've seen how that inner hunger takes root and how it functions like an unstoppable engine. Next, we'll break down how this engine plays out in the seduction-discard cycle itself, how desire flares and then extinguishes, leaving devastation in its wake. Imagine stepping into a whirlwind of intense passion. In the beginning, it feels like destiny, like you and she were spun from the same cosmic dust. Meet her for the first time, And you sense something magnetic. Her gaze lingers on you with a heat that stirs your blood. Around her, the world feels charged with electricity. Each laugh, each brush of skin, each stolen glance becomes a promise of something transcendent. You believe you've finally discovered that rare connection, the kind of bond that novels and songs are written about. This is the seduction phase in full force. When the shadow's hunger first awakens in her, she unleashes an intoxicating energy, an almost supernatural confidence that makes you feel special, chosen, almost heroic. In Jungian language, the shadow projects its own need for validation onto you. You become the vessel through which she finally feels seen. Every good morning text is laced with cosmic significance. Every compliment. You're different. I've never felt like this echoes in your mind long after the message disappears. But why does this intensity feel so addictive? The answer lies in dopamine, that neurological elixir of pleasure. At first, your brain lights up like a pinball machine, all those feel-good chemicals surging through your system each time her name pops up on your phone. Her attentiveness creates a feedback loop. The more you feel special, the more you want to see her attention, which in turn fires off another dopamine release, and so on. You feel invincible, as though you've been anointed by fate itself. In reality, that dopamine high is a ticking clock. In the early days of any romantic spark, new love, new lust, new everything, the novelty floods your brain with pleasure. It's as if each moment with her is a brand new adventure. But human neurochemistry has a cruel flaw: we adapt. What once electrified your senses quickly becomes routine. The rush dissipates, leaving behind something flat. In Jungian terms, the novelty mask drops, exposing the shadow lurking beneath. Now the same attentiveness that once felt miraculous feels overbearing. Those constant texts turn into overkill. The messages that thrilled you become a dull background noise. When novelty fades, the discard phase begins. At first, the shift is subtle. Maybe her replies slow by a few minutes, then by hours. Her once sunlit voice over the phone adopts a muted tone. The glow in her eyes, so bright just weeks ago, cools to indifference. Suddenly you catch yourself asking, what did I do wrong? Why isn't she excited to hear from me anymore? You replay every interaction, convinced that if only you'd been wittier, more spontaneous, more attentive, you could have kept the fire burning. But here's the harsh truth. It wasn't about your effort. It was about the shadow's insatiable thirst. Remember, external validation never truly fills that void. The shadow demands fuel, and once the initial dose no longer registers, it hunts for a fresh source. What began as sublime seduction now crumbles into coldness. Conversations become curt. Hey, fine, I'm busy. Plans for the weekend vanish. When you ask if everything is okay, her answer is vague. I'm just tired. I need space. In reality, she's feeding the shadow's demand elsewhere. In Jungian mythic language, the devouring feminine has finished her feast on your attention. Like the siren luring a sailor to his doom, she claimed you completely, and now that you've been consumed, she moves on. You are left in the wreckage, confused, battered, wondering how someone who once worshipped you could vanish without a trace. You thought you were the protagonist. In truth, you were a disposable character in the shadow's unending drama. Why does this cycle repeat so mercilessly? It's not because she's intentionally ruthless. It's because the shadow operates automatically, an inner program running beneath awareness. Each time she senses the routine creeping in, the shadow's hunger stirs. Stability feels suffocating, like a straitjacket on her psyche. The moment her partner offers the safety most people crave. Steady texts, predictable weekend plans, unwavering presence. The shadow screams, boredom, boredom. In its panic, it pushes her to seek chaos stimulation, anything to drown out the silence of the void. Let's return to a real-life example, Sarah, a pseudonym. At first, her new boyfriend Mark was her sun, lighting up her world with every compliment. She basked in his admiration, sweet texts, surprise bouquets, you're my everything declarations. For months, she seemed unstoppable, glowing as though she'd never known insecurity. But then, after about 4 months, Mark's consistency became predictable, same lunch plans, same weekend routines. Inevitably, Sarah began to feel restless. The morning texts felt stale. Good morning, darling, became what's up in her mind. When Mark suggested a cozy movie night on Friday, her excitement evaporated. The comfort she once craved now felt like a trap. And so Sarah's temperature plunged. By the time Mark sensed something was off, she'd already started looking for a fresh flame, a new co-worker who paid her attention during lunch breaks, whose compliments felt novel. Mark's calls went unanswered. When he finally asked for clarity, she replied, "I just don't know who I am anymore." Mark was devastated, convinced he'd been blindsided. What he didn't realize was that Sarah's shadow was steering the ship, and the ship had no dock. This seduction-discard cycle leaves collateral damage everywhere. Mark's self-esteem lay in tatters. He spent months replaying their early conversations, trying to resurrect the spark that once roared. Sarah, meanwhile, felt inexplicably empty even as she moved on to her next partner. The momentary rush of new attention never lasted. She felt like a ghost, drifting from one flame to the next, never realizing that the demon she was running from was inside her own psyche. In summary, the seduction-discard cycle is not about conscious betrayal. It's the shadow's appetite demanding an endless supply of novelty and validation. You find yourself worshipped until you're no longer needed, and then you disappear. Restoring equilibrium requires her to shine a light on the void, to face the shadow that drives her from flame to flame. Until that happens, the cycle will persist, and both parties will continue to taste the bitter ruin of unhealed wounds. We've dissected how desire transforms into discard. Next, we'll explore the impact of this cycle on men, why they feel shattered, and why she changed is the cruelest lie. You wake up one morning to discover she's gone, no goodbye message, no explanation. Your heart races, palms sweat, and 1,000 questions flood your mind. Did I do something wrong? Was I not enough? How did our love vanish overnight? That torment is the fallout of the seduction-discard cycle. For many men, it feels like a sucker punch. One day, you're the hero of her story. The next, you're a ghost in her memory. When the shadow drives her to discard men, often spiral into self-blame. They replay every text, every conversation, convinced that if only they had been funnier, more spontaneous, more attentive, they could have stopped the collapse. This belief that deeper efforts or grander gestures could fix the problem only deepens the wound. Because here's the brutal Jungian truth. The issue was never your effort. Your partner's shadow was roaring for a new source of validation. You were not the villain, you were the mirror reflecting her void. Let's be clear, this is not about bad men or good men failing. It's about a psychological mechanism that runs itself. You might have been loving, supportive, and patient, showering her with praise. You're amazing, you're brilliant, I adore you. And for a fleeting moment, the void shrank. But the moment novelty faded, her shadow whispered, I need more. Once the engine starved, she withdrew, and you were left clutching the ghost of a passion that once burned so bright. The most common phrase you'll hear afterward is, she changed, but she didn't. The shadow's game was there before you arrived, and it will persist long after you leave. You were never the cause, you were never the cure. Instead, you became collateral damage in an unconscious war. Every text left unanswered, every plan cancelled, every distant heartbeat whispered. It was never about you, it was about her hunger. Imagine trying to outrun a rainstorm with an umbrella riddled with holes. No matter how fast you run or how deftly you dodge, you'll end up soaked. That's what being the solution to her hunger feels like. You can run errands, surprise her with gifts, plan epic dates, yet the void remains unfilled. The harder you try, the more the fog of confusion thickens around you. Why isn't love enough? Here's another misconception. Some men think if I become more mysterious, play harder to get, I can keep her interest. But that strategy only feeds the shadow's pattern. The moment you withhold attention, you mimic what the shadow craves, a chaser game, reinforcing the belief in her unconscious that stability is intolerable. You enter a dangerous feedback loop where neither genuine connection nor fabricated games can satisfy the hunger. Worse, some men internalize this pain so deeply that they begin questioning their own worth. Am I unlovable? Was I a fool for caring so much? Those questions can morph into deep-seated insecurity, leading to anxiety, depression, or a warped perspective on future relationships. The psychological blow of being discarded by someone who once made you feel indispensable can resonate for months, even years. If you've experienced this, know that you were not the problem. You were the mirror, reflecting an unresolved void in her soul. The second she saw what she didn't want to face, the emptiness festering in her shadow, she broke the mirror. And in that shattering, you felt the fragments pierce your own sense of reality. The only way to reclaim your power is to recognize that her hunger was never about you. Stop seeking closure from someone who cannot provide it. Instead, turn inward. Seek therapy, process the trauma, and learn to rebuild your self-worth, independent of another's validation. When you realize that you were a witness to her shadow's drama, not its cause, you can begin to heal. Next, we'll delve into the hidden origin of that void, why she feels disconnected from herself, and how the journey of individuation offers a path to true integration. You may wonder what created that cavernous void fueling the shadow's hunger. Why does stability feel like suffocation and independence masquerade as freedom? The answer lies not in men, but in an inner fracture, a disconnection from the self that begins long before any adult romance. Imagine a little girl who learned early that her emotions were burdensome. Every time she cried, her caregiver dismissed her. Stop being dramatic, don't make a scene. Over time, those raw feelings were shoved into the shadows deemed unacceptable. She grew up believing that need equals weakness, an unspoken lesson that I'm only worthy when I'm perfect. Those seeds of conditional love germinated into a persistent inner whisper, "You are not enough." When that whisper became too loud, she buried it deeper, unaware that she was planting a black hole inside her psyche. In Jungian psychology, we call this disconnection alienation from the self. The self, in Jungian terms, is the wholeness of one's being, the integration of conscious ego and unconscious shadow. When a person suppresses essential parts of themselves, they become fragmented, a persona that functions on the surface and a shadow that seethes with unmet needs and repressed wounds. In many modern women's narratives, hyper-independence or relentless self-sufficiency becomes the armor they wear to protect that hidden cavern. On the outside, it looks like strength. She doesn't need anyone, she's unbreakable. But on the inside, the shield conceals the terrifying vulnerability of truly facing her own emptiness. Why does stability feel like boredom? Ask yourself, when the chaos pauses, when weekend routines settle into comfortable rhythms, what remains? Silence. And in that silence, the shadow's voice grows deafening, echoing, "You are hollow, you are unworthy." In desperate urgency, the psyche leaps from one drama to the next, seeking stimuli that will drown out the chorus of doubt. A steady partner offering unwavering support becomes a threat to that unconscious defense. Calm feels unsafe because calm means she must face the void. Consider another real-life example, Lana, a pseudonym. Throughout her adolescence, she excelled at everything sports, academics, social circles because approval buoyed her. When she transitioned to adulthood, her confidence seemed rock solid. She refused to rely on anyone emotionally. Early in relationships, she dazzled her partners with grand gestures, weekend trips, lavish compliments, feverish intensity. But after a few months of settling in, she felt trapped. Rather than admit that silence scared her, she blamed her partner's reliability. "You're too predictable," she'd snap. In truth, she believed that if she slowed down, if she let someone truly in, they'd see the decaying emptiness she'd spent a lifetime hiding. So how does one heal this fracture? Jung offered the concept of individuation, a lifelong process of integrating the unconscious with the conscious, of shining a light into the deepest recesses of the psyche. Individuation demands that we welcome every part of ourselves, even especially those we've been taught to deny. It's a journey inward, one that requires courage to confront the darkest corridors of the mind. The first step is recognition. Noticing the pattern, naming the hunger. When she sees that no amount of attention will ever suffice, she can begin to question, what emptiness am I trying to bury? This might look like journaling about childhood wounds or working with a therapist to trace the origin of her insecurities. It might involve shadow work exercises, identifying moments when she felt abandoned or unloved, then acknowledging the feelings that followed. Each time she allows herself to feel those forgotten pains, she weakens the shadow's grip. Next comes integration. Rather than pushing away the void, she learns to sit with it. Meditation. Mindfulness or guided visualization can create safe spaces where she allows vulnerability to surface. Perhaps she writes a letter to her younger self, promising compassion rather than dismissal. Perhaps she practices naming her needs. "I need support, I need love, I need acceptance." By acknowledging those statements without shame, she begins to dissolve the divide between persona and shadow. Alongside integration, she must cultivate self-compassion. When she inevitably stumbles, when the shadow rears and pushes her toward another relationship to fill the void. Self-compassion teaches her to pause, to catch the impulsive thought, to ask, "Am I truly hungry for love, Or am I seeking refuge from my inner emptiness? Each moment of self-awareness chips away at the black hole. Take, for example, Maya, introduced earlier. After years of hurt and heartbreak, she finally sought therapy. Through guided exercises, she confronted the memory of sitting alone at 14, crying on her bedroom floor, while her parents ignored her pleas for comfort. She allowed herself to grieve that child's pain. In so doing, she released a portion of the shadow's energy, and the hunger lost some of its intensity. Instead of demanding nightly declarations of love from a partner, she began to practice writing affirmations to herself. You are enough. You are worthy. Over months, her relationship's stabilized stability no longer felt like a trap, but as something precious. This process, though, isn't quick. Individuation can span years, sometimes a lifetime, because the unconscious resists exposure. But even small cracks in the shadow can break the seduction-discard cycle. When she learns to find validation internally rather than externally, attention and admiration lose their hypnotic power. When stability stops feeling like boredom, she can settle into a loving relationship without the need to flee. Ultimately, the void isn't a curse, it's an invitation. It calls her to dive beneath the surface to reclaim the pieces of herself she cast into darkness. When she lights a candle in that shadowy cavern, when she turns her fear into curiosity, the hunger's grip weakens. And only then can genuine connection blossom, because she no longer needs you to complete her. We've traced the origin of the shadow, explored why stability feels suffocating, and mapped the path of individuation. In our final section, we'll summarize these insights and offer concrete steps. Actions you can take right now to break free from these cycles. You now understand that it wasn't your late-night texts or your grand gestures that failed. It was her shadow's hunger, a force rooted in an inner void no amount of external devotion could fill. Remember, you were never the cause and you were never the cure. You were simply a mirror reflecting her own unmet needs. Once you recognize that truth, you can finally stop blaming yourself and begin the work of genuine healing. So how do you move forward? First, let go of the illusion that more effort or better tactics can fix this. Beware of thinking, if I just become more exciting, she'll stay. That belief only feeds a cycle of chasing a moving target. Instead, turn your focus inward. Rebuild your self-worth apart from anyone's validation. Seek therapy or coaching that helps you process the trauma of being discarded. Journal about your own patterns of attachment. Where have you given away your power? When have you allowed someone else's hunger to eclipse your own needs? For women who recognize this pattern, plunging into shadow work is essential. Start by identifying the earliest memories of conditional love times when affection was granted only if you performed or remained silent. Notice how those moments still echo in your adult relationships. Practice saying to yourself, I am enough, even when the shadow screams otherwise. Engage in guided meditations or breathwork to stay present with discomfort rather than fleeing from it. Over time, you'll find that stability, once suffocating, transforms into sanctuary. To help you on this journey, I've distilled these principles into the SIM method. Shadow awareness. Recognize the hunger and name it. Integration exercises. Use journaling therapy and mindfulness to bring the void into consciousness. Mindful self-compassion. Replace self-criticism with kindness whenever the shadow resurfaces. If you're ready to break free from the seduction-discard cycle, whether you've been on the receiving end of it or you're caught in its grip, download the free SIM Method ebook linked in the pinned comment. Within its pages, you'll find practical exercises to start illuminating your shadow today. Above all, remember this. It was never about you, and it never will be. You deserve relationships grounded in mutual wholeness, not temporary fixes. The moment you stop chasing the broken and start nurturing your own light, everything changes. Embrace the journey inward and watch as the world outside shifts in response to the strength you cultivate within. Thank you for watching. If this resonated like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear the truth and subscribe for more insights on shadow work, Jungian psychology, and transforming emotional chaos into lifelong clarity.